Thanks for joining us on our second episode of our podcast. And I want to talk today about the subconscious. And just so that you know, 80% of our intellectual processing is subconscious. And it's an amazing mechanism, the subconscious. Basically what happens is repeated thoughts become beliefs. If we repeat a thought over and over again, it will become a belief. And there's no mechanism to understand whether it's a true thought or a wise thought. If we repeat a thought, it will become a belief. As we repeat a belief, what happens next is it becomes a habit. A habit is a decision process that requires no conscious thought. So this is just something that happens automatically, and it's basically like an app on a phone, that once you have a habit programmed into your subconscious, it just works without you having to reference it again. So if every morning you have a habit of getting up and having a cup of coffee, you won't make a decision about it, it will just happen habitually. If we repeat habits, they then start to create our identity. And from an identity point of view, then that's where we create our ego, create a version of us that is reflected out to the world. So it's very important for us to understand that our thoughts, the thoughts that we repeat over and over again, are creating our identity, creating our ego, the one that we project out to the world. And quite often this is disconnected from the real us, from our soul. This version of us, this outward version of us, is disconnected from our soul.
We have to realize also that repeated egos create a collective consciousness, a collective story that defines what is right and wrong, good and bad, true and false. Most of the time there is a large disconnect between ego, our story that we've made up, and who we actually are, our soul. A lot of the time our apps are based upon incorrect beliefs. Our ego is not connected to our real nature, and the collective consciousness is telling a story that is not true. For example, at one time or another, the world was perceived to be flat. Slavery, apartheid, misogyny, racism have all to some extent been accepted as good and right.
I can recall at high school having a teacher who taught me mathematics, who every time he spoke to me, he would put his hand on my right shoulder and would be criticising me about my ability in maths in one way or another. And I became very resentful, and I actually started to program that feeling. Someone would touch me on the shoulder and I would automatically go into a sense of resentment. And I remember my dad doing it, just touching me on the shoulder, and for some reason I was automatically angry, and I turned around at him and was ready to bite him. And it was only later, many years later, that I realized it was actually a kind of hypnosis that was happening to me by this maths teacher. It was funny because after high school I had a job, and they did a psych test on me, and they worked out that I was very good at mathematics, and they got me into computer programming and paid for me to learn computer programming. And I realized straight away that I loved it and that I had a natural affinity with mathematics. And so all through high school I taught myself that I was no good at mathematics and I hated it, and only to find that at the end of high school I actually had this natural affinity.
When we realize that we've installed an app that is not serving us, there is a paradigm shift. We call it cognitive dissonance. It says everything that we thought was right we realize is wrong, and we need to go about a process of letting go and reinstalling a higher app. If we're doing this right, we'll feel a weight lifted, as though an anchor has been released and we have entered a flow. When we install apps that aren't in the flow of love, that aren't from our soul, they'll feel heavy and weigh us down. We'll feel as though life is heavy and serious and weighty, and we feel alone and that we are working hard. As we release and go more with the flow of love, life becomes light and fun and friendly, and that the universe is supporting us, Meditation can be a process of sitting and witnessing our apps. With kindness and self-love, we just silently reflect and observe. Often we can even identify the forces that have influenced the creation of our habits, such as parents, teachers, or peers. We have to also realize that we will defend our habits once they've become our identity, even sometimes irrationally. We feel unwisely that our ego identity is who we are, and so even when our beliefs, our habits have been shown to us to be untrue, cognitive dissonance tells us that we will continue to automatically defend them until we are able to uninstall those apps. For us, meditation is the wisest and truest method of letting go of the surface apps and recentering ourselves to our actual self, our soul. From there we can recreate our ego identity with habits and beliefs that are connected with our soul.